Hey folks, Brian Castle here. This is my podcast, the Productized Podcast. We're back for a whole new batch of episodes here in 2017. I'm excited to bring them to you. Today we've got a good one, talking to my friend Tim Conley, who you may know from podcast fame of the Foolish Adventure Show. It's no longer running, but it was a great series of episodes that he ran for a while there. Today, Tim is known as a well-respected and trusted business coach, or as he would prefer to be called, a business consultant. As you'll hear, we talked about all that. Got into Tim's backstory, which was really interesting, you know, coming from a small town in the Midwest into the military, the Air Force, and what he learned there about and how that impacted his later years and into business, into the birth of the internet and how he navigated those early years, and then into today, into his coaching and consulting business, and really how he runs that as a business and how he works with other business owners and how he's kind of optimized his life, really, his life and his business around his time, leveraging his time. And we covered it all, covered a lot of ground, always insightful. I'm always learning something whenever I talk to Tim, and I know that you will too. So with that, we'll get right to it. Here's my conversation with Tim Conley. All right, I'm here with Tim Conley. Tim, thanks for joining me today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Brian.
So, I mean, why don't we start off? Like, what are you kind of focused on right now? So, I mean, folks, you know, probably know a bit about you. Maybe they've heard your podcast. I know that your career has gone in many different directions over the years. We'll get into a bit of that story. But what are you kind of focused on right now? What does your typical week look like right now?
Let's see. Focus might be a strong word. That might be a little too strong. My main thing, what I do for a living and what I enjoy the most is I work with founders, entrepreneurs, and I help them become the leaders of their company. So I've worked with so many entrepreneurs over my entire career, and a lot of them get into this stage of, I hustled, I got to this particular level, now I'm pulling my hair out, I'm working long hours, I thought it was supposed to get easier. Help. That's where I come in. And I come in and I show them how to take control of all the things they have to do. I start working with them to build their first leadership team. So they start surrounding themselves with the right people to take their business to the next level. And in that process, I help them work less hours, make more money. And as one of my clients said, I love my business again.
Right. And so you do that. Do you call your business like a coaching business or consultant, or how do you think about it?
I really wish my clients would call me a consultant, as a management consultant, an executive consultant, but they all call me a coach. So I am an executive coach.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things that like everybody's kind of known for something, whether they like it or not. And, that may change from year to year and whatnot, but yeah, I think we probably do this with every public figure really, but like we put people in boxes, whether it's, appropriate or not.
Right.
And so, I mean, if your clients and people in your networks and things kind of think of you as a business coach, what would you say, what's the other side of that? Like, what is kind of like your secret strength or whatever that I think most people aren't, or that you think most people aren't aware of that you kind of bring to the table?
So I was recently just asked this by a friend of mine. The one thing that I'm really good at doing, I have this brain that is very reactive. You ask me a question, it comes up with pretty much the ideal answer if the knowledge base is somewhere locked in there somewhere. So what I'm able to do is take all the experiences that I've had over 2 decades, all the different clients I've worked with, all the things I've studied, and be able to give them the right answer, the thing that they should be working on. They bring up this problem, and then I can quickly say, here's the approach you should take. And it works most of the time. I can't give you an exact number, probably 90-something%.
Yeah, like what's the conversion rate on it?
Yeah. Basically, it's not guessing. That's what I'm trying to say is I'm not guessing and I'm not going off of some theory I read in a book or something. This is all real world stuff. The things that the particular behaviors that entrepreneurs have put into a particular situation with a certain business problem and then there's going to be an appropriate answer for that.
Yeah, and I guess that's based on experience from your own experiences, but also across all the people that you've helped and worked with over the years.
Right. And so I like using a term that unfortunately became a corporate buzzword, coined by Buckminster Fuller, synergy. I have this ability to take different ideas from a variety of sources and create the actual synergistic response for my clients. And I'm good at it. That's the one thing that I can say that's my superpower. Out of all the things that I've done in my life, that's the one thing I'm really good at.
And so before I get into kind of your backstory and whatnot, I guess I still want to, maybe the listeners want to get an understanding of what does this actually look like in practice today? So you're doing, I understand you do some group coaching, some one-on-ones, some content creation. Like what are the activities that you're doing day to day, week right now?
Day to day, week to week, I've been trying to write down a lot of the experiences, trying to write down the frameworks that I use with my clients. I've been doing a lot of writing for a while. Not a very good writer, but I still try. I try to get it down. So I do a lot of that.
You know, you sell yourself short of that. I've read your writing. You do a lot of writing on social networks, but also on your own site, your blog and whatnot. And it's really good because it's very story based. And I think that's what people connect with. And every time I read something of yours, it like pulls me right in. It's definitely worth reading.
Good. Just as long as you're not a grammar Nazi, you could probably get through my writing. But my writing, the grammar is terrible because I write the way I speak, and I still kind of speak like a redneck from Southern Illinois. So
like, what do your programs look like, or your line of product, if you will, or like how does that roll out?
Okay, so I do two things. I have one-on-one coaching where I work directly with an entrepreneur, and we meet twice a month. And we just dive into where they're at in their business. So that all starts with a business assessment. I have a deep dive where it's like a ton of questions, drives clients nuts. But we get into all the things that make up their business, so that we have a starting point. And then I can analyze that and look for, it looks like this part really needs to get fixed first. So if somebody needs to hire a leadership team and they have no money, well, then why don't they have money? So is that sales? Is that margins? Usually it's a combination of both, that their sales aren't that great and their margins are terrible. So we go in and fix those things, and then we start doing something else. But if somebody's got plenty of sales and their margins are fantastic, but their business is in chaos, well, then we start fixing operations. We go in and we figure out what's wrong here. Typically, it's a lack of leadership, both at the entrepreneur's level, the founder level, and middle management. You know, it's hard to believe how I've been so anti the man for all my life, and here I am, a guy who helps founders put middle management into place because it is so effective. So I'll do that.
Yeah, I mean, at a certain point, you need to, if you're going to grow, you need to have a system in place. But you know, I want to dive more into your the way that you structure coaching and the way that works and how you've built that out as a business and operation for yourself. So let's definitely get up to that. But before we get there, I do want to kind of go back and just hear a bit of your story. I think folks might be interested or curious about that. So right now, you're based in Arizona, Phoenix area, right?
Yeah. I'm out in the desert in way north of Phoenix, Arizona. So I got coyotes that run through my yard, that kind of desert.
Very cool. Where are you from originally? Are you from that area?
No, I'm from Southern Illinois. I grew up in a very tiny town right next to a cornfield, like literally half a block away from a cornfield. Yeah, so I grew up really close in just this small town at the time. It was like 500 people. Today, I think after all these years, it's maybe 1,500. So really, really tiny town in Southern Illinois, and just had one of those kind of Tom Sawyer childhood, playing out in the woods and, playing pirates and playing cowboys and all that stuff. That was my childhood, just living out in the country, enjoying the ability to just run around like a madman.
What does your family look like? Like, what'd your parents do? You got brothers, sisters?
Oh yeah, I have a brother. I have an older brother, and he still lives there in the same town.
So he didn't get out.
Oh no. So not only that, he was there. He lives right next door. He bought the house right next door to my parents, and my father put a gate between the two houses so that the grandkids could run back and forth.
Well, the grandkids here in Connecticut, we're like 30 minutes from where my mom lives, and that's about as close enough that I could be. Any closer, I don't know, but she's close enough that she can come babysit.
Yeah. It's like here, have the kids for a while so that we can have some adult time. Yeah. So yeah, my parents, my mom's worked for a bunch of years for the Department of Education in Illinois. She actually just retired. So she just retired. My dad retired a few years back. Actually makes a couple grand a month, I think, right now, where he makes duck calls. He handcrafts duck calls, and he's actually pretty popular in the Midwest. So his duck calls sell for like anywhere from 120 something up to like 300 and something.
All right, so I'm like the East Coast guy from New York. What is a duck call?
It's a little musical instrument, basically, that when blown through properly makes the sound of a duck. And when you're out duck hunting, then it would attract other ducks, because as they're flying over, they are attracted to other ducks. So if ducks are already on a pond someplace, then they hear those other ducks and they go, "Oh, hey, this must be an awesome place for us to land." So they'll swoop back around, and that gives the duck hunter a chance to shoot a duck.
Wow. Who knew?
Well, lots of people actually.
I guess so. Yeah. I guess out there in duck hunting country.
Exactly.
So, okay. So you're living like the Tom Sawyer life out there. And what are you thinking? Like, did you early on, did you know, okay, I'm going to get out of here and go somewhere else? And
Oh yeah, flat out. 7 years old. 7 years old, I kind of woke up. That's the best way I can describe it. I woke up to my situation in life. I was a 7-year-old who understood he was poor. His family was poor. He had no money, and that I lived in some place really small. So one of my favorite all-time characters is James Bond. All-time favorite. And I think it is for a lot of people. But as a 7-year-old watching Roger Moore and going, "Oh my gosh, look at these places that this guy goes." Look at it's like in one single movie, he's in 7 different exotic locations. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is real. Like that stuff is real. Outside of this little town that I'm in, I know there are big cities out there. And just in the United States. But look at these places. That's India. That's Thailand. That's all these different places, right? That he's gone. And I knew then I was going to go see it. And so it's kind of cool. Like one of the scenes on the river in Bangkok, James Bond's having this chase in the boat and everything in one of these like really long boats that are there. And I've been there. Granted, it was many, many years later and it looks completely different, but I've been there. So
lifelong dream acquired.
Yes. It's like I knew it from that time, from the time I was 7, that I was going to go see the world.
So that was kind of like your vision for your future: travel and get out, see the world. Were you thinking about business early on? And like, when did that kind of come into your mindset of I actually might become an entrepreneur? It doesn't sound, well, I guess your father has doing some entrepreneurial stuff, but like, where did that come into play for you?
Oh, okay. So two things. I didn't just have an idea of traveling. I wanted to be James Bond. Okay. He wore tuxes. He went into fancy restaurants and casinos and hotels and had all these great drinks and stuff and fancy cars. I wanted all of it. I wanted all of that because my existence was the complete opposite of all of that. Okay, so then the fact that I understood I was poor and I wanted things and my parents couldn't buy it for me. So I decided if I was going to have my Star Wars action figures and my G.I. Joe action figures, if I was going to have these things, I had to get them myself. So this was, Star Wars came out in 1977. I was a 6-year-old kid, started wanting, it's like I wanted all the action figures. And so back then, glass bottles were everywhere. And so they had a deposit on them. And back then, lots of people littered. They would just chuck them out the window. As soon as they were done drinking them in their car, they'd chuck them out the window. And so I went around with a little wagon and I collected as many of these bottles as I could, took them in for their deposit, and took that deposit, bought trading cards and stickers. I started with candy, but found out quickly that kids don't spend much money on candy. You would think they would.
So you did some early customer development.
Oh, yeah. Turns out they'll only spend a little bit more for the convenience of getting candy at school than they would at the store. And what I learned was parents will buy them candy, but parents wouldn't buy them trading cards. Parents wouldn't buy them stickers that came in like trading card packs. And so my parents would just let me roam around the town, even as a little kid. And so when I would turn in the deposits for these bottles, I'd go over and buy packs of trading cards and stickers that were all popular at the time, that I knew that the parents wouldn't ever buy it. So then the kids would bring, they'd have 25 cents or something in their pocket when they'd come to grade school. And I would split the packs open and sell the cards and the stickers individually. I would eat, those packs always came with that stick of gum that tasted like cardboard.
Yep.
I sold that thing too.
That's pretty impressive, man. Like early on, you've got the whole system, like starting from the bottles and to leveraging into the cards and then the marketing system, breaking it open. I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah, that was my childhood, and so then even like the lemonade stand, the stereotypical lemonade stand, I didn't just sell lemonade. I bought packs of gum and broke them open and sold them individually. I sold candy bars. I sold all kinds of stuff from my tiny little convenience store that I would set up. I even had adults come and buy because I had goodies that they would just walk by and go, oh, I'll buy that.
So, okay. So early on, like, what are you doing for a living, or what did you see yourself doing for a living as you got older? You moved out. What was kind of your first move?
I'll give you the same response I gave my high school guidance counselor all 4 years. My response was, I'm going to move to Southern California, live on the beach. This is not the 1980s. Drink wine coolers and learn how to surf. That was my life's ambition. And then when pressed, I said, I will change careers, not just jobs, but careers, complete career change every 5 years. And all the things that I've done divided up by the number of years I've been working comes out to about every 5 years, I'm involved in something completely different.
Huh. So you mean looking back on it, that's how it turned out?
Looking back on it, yeah. And you divide up the number of years by the number of types of businesses and things that I've been involved in that have nothing to do with each other. It's about every 5 years.
How do you kind of characterize that? Like, which years were they all entrepreneurial, like business ventures, or were you kind of going back and forth, or like what did that look like?
No. Okay, so I wanted to travel. I'm a poor kid in Illinois. The only people that I ever know of that travel were rich kids, kids of rich parents, and I wasn't one of those. And the people on TV who were all rich. So I had this idea that there was no possible way as soon as I graduated high school that I would be able to travel except by going into the military. And so I decided not to go to college, had a scholarship, chose not to use it, didn't even let my parents know that I'd gotten that letter. I joined the Air Force and went off to travel the world, and they sent me to Texas and then Arizona. And that's all the places in the world they sent me. So I while in the Air Force, I traveled the world on my own dime. So they give you like a month of vacation time, and I saved up my money, and I'd hop on a plane and I'd go somewhere in the world.
What did you do in the Air Force?
I did environmental work. I actually had the job title of bioenvironmental engineer. The civilian term was environmental scientist.
What do you do there? Like, and what does that have to do with flying airplanes? I don't...
Nothing, but and always got that. Like, oh, so you fly airplanes? Like, no. There's only a handful of people in the military, in the Air Force, who actually fly planes. Everyone else supports that mission. So one of my jobs was to make sure that the military did not pollute the environment. The other part of my job was what's called in the civilian world industrial hygiene, which is to make sure that the jobs themselves people were protected from. So they had the proper hearing protection for the level of noise that they were exposed to, that they had the proper equipment to handle hazardous chemicals and things like that. So I did that. My wartime job I never got to use it, even during the Gulf War. I never got to use this, but it was nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare. So if there was ever any kind of attack, I would my job was to get sent out to make sure that there were no nukes, it wasn't like a dirty bomb, make sure that there weren't any chemical weapons, and I had to go out and sample this. And then also part of my job was that if ever that was the case, when the all clear was sounded by my instruments, I got to be the lucky person to be the first one to take off my mask to make sure the equipment was correct.
Luckily, you didn't have to go through that, actually.
Yeah, exactly. You know,
I've met I feel like a segment of my entrepreneurial friends or entrepreneurs that I've met have a military background of sort. I didn't know that you were in the military, but what do you think that gave you later in life as you built out businesses? I mean, one thing that I've noticed from those folks is that they do tend to be very systems oriented, with a systems mindset. They grow things very methodically. And I mean, I know that you're big on systems and everything. Is that connection there, or like what else, like any other impact that the military made for you as an entrepreneur?
Okay. So question for you. How many 19-year-olds do you know that are in charge of a multi-million-dollar project?
Not many.
Pretty much none.
Zero.
Except for a few kids that came up with some software and got funded in Silicon Valley, right? Outside of those rare cases, no one. But the military takes a kid right out of high school and trains them and sticks them into a job where they are responsible for something that's really expensive and very important. So first thing was confidence. Like when you're in the military, you don't really understand this because it's like a fish in water. Everyone around you has the same level of responsibility. They have to handle these things. And you have to do that. You don't get the choice of I'm not very good at this, so maybe I shouldn't have to. Right? No, you just have to do it. And so you develop the skills of, hey, I have a problem to solve. I'm ordered to solve this problem. I'll figure it out. So that gives you a level of confidence that going through college can never give a kid. Never. Because you learn that, I am actually capable of doing something very important at a young age.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so that's like the one thing. The other was an opportunity to grow up under a structured environment. So partly that's that systems, right? There's a whole system to coming into the military, growing up in the ranks, learning how to do your job, making sure you do it right. And then the last thing, and it goes with that idea of you just have to get it done, is that there's never enough resources. And we know this as entrepreneurs. There's never enough resources to get it all done. But in the military, they don't care. They don't care if you don't have enough resources to get the job done. You just get the job done. That the mission has to be completed. You don't get a choice. And so when you don't have a choice, then you do whatever it takes to accomplish it. Entrepreneurs learn that lesson too. So that's why I think so many military people have what it takes to be an entrepreneur, is because they've learned, they're confident with their skills. They've learned how to work in teams. They've probably even led teams while in the military. And then they know how to get stuff done even when there aren't enough resources to accomplish it.
And having that confidence in the unknown, right? Like going into a situation or going into a business or venture where you don't know what the answers are, but you have the confidence to know that you're able to figure it out.
Oh yeah, you should interview someone who's had military has had combat experience, because that's truly the unknown, and their training has to kick in to be able to deal with a combat situation. It's true life and death situation, and they do it. Right. They go through that. So there's a lot that the military can provide to young people.
It's interesting. So kind of fast forward after the military. I know that you changed direction every 5 years or so. What was kind of the next big, not necessarily chronologically, but just looking back, like what was like a big turning point, a big change in direction that you think had a big impact on things for you?
Mosaic. That came out.
Huh.
Which was soon turned into Netscape.
Yeah. So just going from like an offline world to an online world.
Well, I'd already been dinking around with things like Gopher and stuff like that. The internet. I started playing around on my Commodore 64 in the 80s. Whenever I could scrounge up enough cash and pay for some CompuServe time, I'd get on the internet and mess around. There wasn't much you could do as somebody not in the military or in academia at that time. But, I played around with it, but it didn't captivate me because it was all text based. I'm a very visual person. And so it was always text based. But then all of a sudden the internet was graphical. And oh my gosh, I was studying architecture at the time. And I was designing and building furniture and cabinetry and stuff like that while in school. And then all of a sudden, the internet goes from being something that you just typed words into to where it was graphical. And I was like, oh, I need to know that. And so I taught myself how to do HTML. HTML 1.0, man. It's like,
I know. I remember my dad had an early computer with a Prodigy account, and I just remember the first of all, seeing advertisement on the computer screen. I was like, why? I was kind of probably like a young teenager at the time or something. Like, why are they showing? Where do those even come from? How are they current? Like, just the whole concept of dynamic content, coming from the internet onto the computer screen was so weird. And then the other memory that I remember is like the first time I saw a photograph loaded on the screen. It was like a photograph of like Bill Clinton or something, and it loaded like one line of the photograph at a time. It took like 10 minutes to bring in like one photo.
Yeah,
crazy.
Yeah. And the only way I could afford that was at the university computer lab, because there's no way. I didn't even have I didn't have internet at my house the whole time I went through college.
So what'd you do? Like, so that stuff kind of came out. How did that, like, what did you get into?
So I loved traveling, and I started making web pages, mind you, not websites. I started making web pages, and then I started doing that for other people. And so I made a little bit of money there. And then my buddy and I decided, what we need to do? All these kids, so the .com era kicks off. And my buddy and I decide, we're going to get rich just like all those other kids writing their business plans on a napkin. So we decided to make an international tourism company. And I coded up the website. And that was our very first big push. That was the .com era. And and it was just terrible. It crashed and burned. I had no idea how to run a business. I didn't know what I was doing. Didn't know how to get customers on the internet. But back then it didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was, could you get funding? And then could you use that funding to get eyeballs? So that was kind of the plan, was somewhere we would be given lots and lots of money, and then we would use that money to get eyeballs to our site, and then one day we'd be rich. That was kind of like the underpants gnomes. That was our business plan.
So that was the plan. Like, what actually happened with it? Did it take off at all? Like, did you have any sort of early traction? It was just kind of an idea that didn't really go anywhere.
No, it did not go anywhere. It was a bad idea. We had gotten like 9 guides around the world. So we had everything kind of committed, and the one thing we didn't have was customers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we built everything else. We knew how everything in this business would work. The website was pretty and everything. The one thing we were getting traffic, we were getting hits back then. That's all we got were hits, and we didn't get any customers. So yeah.
I think everybody has that, some form of that story, right? Like, oh, I had an idea, didn't go anywhere because I didn't understand how to sell and how to get a customer to pay, right?
Right.
So, okay, so maybe like fast forward a bit from there, like what do you kind of consider your first business that had legs and that really went?
What happened was, after I failed, I had a bunch of friends in the tech space. I lived in Portland, Oregon at the time, and I had some friends there, and they basically asked me how their businesses still existed, and they asked me how do we not do what you did, right? So that became the beginning of my consulting. So that's where I learned that I sucked at building like the entire thing. That's how I saw myself at that time, that I was a complete failure. But what I did learn was, right after that, I understood that I didn't know how to sell. So the first thing I did was go out and do sales training programs where I had to go sell face to face with people, right? I went through some structured programs, learned how to sell face to face. So the first program I went through was an insurance program. And so they had this 5-week sales training process, formal sales training process. Turned out to be, a terrible process, but I went through it anyways. Learned how to sell insurance. Hated the idea, but the only reason I went through all of this was to get the training. Was to get real world training. All the stuff I was reading was okay. And, you read a sales book, that's okay.
It's good in theory, but what am I going to learn when I actually try to do it?
But when your heart is pounding as you pick up a phone, like the feeling of cold calling, where that phone, when you pick it up, it's so heavy, right? It's so heavy in your hand, your heart's pounding because for a fact you're going to get rejected the first person you speak to. Right. That you can never get from a book. You can never even get that from me explaining it to you. What I just said is not real to everyone listening unless you've done it. And so that's why I went through that. And then after that, I went over and sold cars for about a month. And turned out that I was one of their top selling new people they've ever had. Because I quickly started making like $1,000 a week, and I was brand spanking new.
But you only did that for a month?
Oh, I did for a month because they were shady, and what killed it for me was
what do you mean car sales?
Yeah, what did it for me was there was a couple that came in and they wanted to buy a used Subaru. And the one that they found, they kind of wanted, but they didn't. There were some issues with it, and we didn't have exactly what they were after. And, for me, I'm like, okay, it's not exactly what you want. That's okay. I'll make sales somewhere else. Well, my boss realized I was about to let this sale go. And he brought in a closer. And the closer came in and just hammered them until they signed the paperwork. And they got me involved in this by when they went off to do the financial paperwork stuff. They said, sit here and don't let them talk about the car. Talk about anything except the car. And because as long as they didn't talk about the car,
As long as they forget about the
about the bad decision that they're about to make, because it wasn't exactly what they wanted. And they went off and did some stuff, and then they finally then they kicked me out of the booth, and the closer came in and closed the sale, and then the next day I quit. I was like, I am not going to be involved in any business that's like this. I will not do shady work just to make money. I won't do it. If my customer isn't going to be super happy with what I do, then I'm not going to do it. So, but even then, the only reason I sold cars was because I knew it was going to be hard. I knew the whole process was going to be hard, and I would have to be face to face with real potential customers and find out what they wanted, go through the products I had available, and sell that to them. And that's what I did. So while I was doing that, I was studying direct response copy. So I'm doing that, studying direct response copy, trying to make ends meet. I'm still doing some websites for people. And then I start consulting, where people are asking me, hey, how do we do this? And I'm like, oh, do you know that if we wrote the space ad that you guys have in this one tech journal, if we change the space ad to be this, it'll get you all kinds of leads. And they're like, oh, really? And so that was my start in marketing, was writing space ads for software companies.
Wow. So I think that, first of all, learning to sell is just by far and away, so too many founders today are not thinking about how do I sell, how do I talk to people, or even that eagerness to go talk to people. I'm just not seeing enough of that.
Oh, it's worse. Yeah, it's so worse. It's that they're actively trying to figure out how not to talk to people. Like, how do we set up our sales process for our SaaS so that we never speak to a single person ever and make millions? That's the approach.
Yeah, I mean, even if you're selling software early on, you have to talk to people, if not forever, to understand what those objections are and really dial in marketing. But on the marketing front, on the copy stuff, like, what was kind of the big aha moment, or the resources, the books that really changed the game for you?
Oh, anything by Caples, John Caples. Read Caples. Read Joe Sugarman. So I knocked off so many Joe Sugarman ads back in the day, because he did a ton of space ads back in the 70s and early 80s. And so I knocked off a lot of those. There's a book called by Eugene Schwartz, I believe, that is, there's actually two Schwartzes spelled differently that are in copywriting. So there's How to Write a Good Advertisement. That's the name of the book. I'd have to go look on my shelf to see the exact title, but it's by Schwartz, called How to Write a Good Advertisement. That is a book that I think everyone should read to learn how to sell. Sugarman's books are also great ones to learn how to sell through words.
Nice. Okay, so like back then, you kind of started to dabble in the consulting and start to work with other businesses, whether it was on marketing or consulting with them. But how do you get into what you consider today's version of your business? Like, what was that transition?
I think it was relatively accidental. I called myself semi-retired for quite some time. I just did some client work every once in a while, and through the process of working on marketing projects, marketing campaigns, I found that so many businesses would sabotage their marketing. And it turns out that's because their operations suck so bad that they couldn't actually handle more customers. So most businesses kind of fall into that frame where they want more customers. All businesses ask them what do they want, more customers. But the way they run their company is so messed up that if they added too many more customers, then lots of people go away mad. So they're like, oh, these people don't know what they're doing, and they ruin this for me. And this is like pre-review days, right? Where reviews dominated pretty much everything.
Oh, yeah. Now, if you're doing anything that's review-based, or that might get reviewed on Google or Yelp or whatever, you're done.
Yeah, you have to fix your operations. You have to go in and fix it. And so then I started fixing operations just so marketing campaigns would succeed. And then eventually so when I decided that I was retired from marketing, I would just coach. I'm using the word coach, but what I do is I'd consult with former clients of mine. And I'd say, I'm not going to do the campaign for you. I'm not going to actually make the marketing campaign, but I'll show your team how to do it. And so that was the point where I transitioned. I transitioned from a guy who did to a guy who advised.
That decision to make that transition, was it because that allowed you to leverage your time and have more free time?
No, I just didn't want to work. And so I started naming a higher and higher price just to give advice. And people kept paying it. And then eventually what happened that why I don't really call myself semi-retired anymore is that people would I would do work for someone. I'd give them advice on how they would fix their marketing, how they'd fix their operations, how they'd fix their sales process and things like that. All the different pieces that make a successful company. I would give them the advice. They'd have their team do it. And boom. They made more money. So then they would go tell other people, hey, you should go talk to Tim because he will show you how to make more money in your business. And then pretty much all but one client in the last 8 years has been from referrals.
So how do you structure your coaching itself? Like, do you use frameworks? Have you developed like a curriculum, if you will, that you kind of go through with each client? How does that work?
I don't use a curriculum. I started to because for those listening, I used to do a podcast called The Foolish Adventure Show, which had a bit of success, and I had a membership site that I put all the kind of training necessary to run an online business inside that membership site. And what I learned, and I already knew this because I'd done some work with some other people who are in the info product space, that basically 95% of the people will never use what they're paying for. I tried my best to get past that. And so I think at best I had maybe 10, 15% of the people who would actually use it and then ultimately succeed from it. Versus 5%. So with all the hard work I did to try to get people to actually use what they were studying, it didn't really fit. And the reason was that people need guidance. Not too many people can read something and then go, oh, that applies to this random area of my business, and I can do that right now and fix it.
Right. Like they need like personalized feedback, like take the teaching, but then apply it to something actually relevant.
Right. There's kind able to make that leap from abstract to concrete is actually pretty hard. And for me, I've just kind of been wired that way to go from abstract and turn it into something concrete. So one of my little claims to fame was that I was the first membership site that had office hours. Because I knew info products, most people would never use them. And if they did, they wouldn't know how to apply them. So I started doing office hours. And that was what started coaching, that like doing office hours where all I did was sit and just answer questions for an hour to 2 hours. And I just answered questions, and then the people would go off and do it. And then they'd come back and be like, yay, it worked. And so that started me on this process of moving from being a consultant to being a coach.
Yeah. I'm also curious about that. Like when you're working with a coaching client or someone in your membership group, or like what happens when someone is just not making the progress that they expect? And how do you deal with that? Or do they just kind of, when that happens, I mean, inevitably some folks, some people see results, some people don't, but do they just go away? Or like, how do you handle that situation where somebody is like the outlier, where everyone's kind of following a path and they're seeing the expected results? It's just not clicking someone. How do you deal with that?
Okay. It's sad, but some tough love is necessary. So the one thing that I had going for me was I didn't need the money from Foolish Adventure. So the membership site, I didn't need that money. So that was something that allowed me to be able to be truthful to my customers. And I think that's why people liked the show, was that I would be truthful. Whereas most information marketers, they just want you to keep paying the monthly subscription. So they'll say whatever it takes to get you to pay for another month of their membership. They don't care. Or they may care that you succeed, but they care more that you pay. And I just never had that. It's just kind of in my my wiring that I would rather you not give me money than for you to get something that you can't use, or that you won't use. If you won't even use it, I make you go away. But always have to figure out, is it won't or can't? Because if it's can't, then I give them their money back. But if it's won't, I send them out the door. Either way is kind of a tough love that says the path you're on is not the right one for you.
Okay, so maybe just as we start to kind of wrap up this a little bit, I'm just curious about, again, like coaching as a business or consulting as a business. Like, what have you learned more recently about optimizing this model, going to group coaching, and any tips or things that have worked pretty well for you there?
I'm an experimenter. I like to muck about. So I wouldn't say that I'm an optimizer. I'm actually will take something that is working optimally and I will come in and mess with it.
Well, even like when I say optimize, even like I kind of mean like optimize for you or your personal goals or whatever.
So I've gone from doing weekly calls to now my structure is I only do client work on the first week and the third week of each month. And that has worked out fantastically because I can give plenty of attention for my clients, but then I've got a week to work on my business. It gives me a time to just recharge. It gives me time to do just goof off, in between client work. And so everybody I just have to pack in client work into those 2 weeks every month. And that's worked really well because I found that clients don't need weekly talks with me. They do not need weekly sessions. Because there's only so much you can get done, even in a 2-week period. Because over time, what happens is we switch after, say, a year and a half or so with a one-on-one client, we'll start switching where they only talk to me maybe once a month. And then we start focusing on, let's start coaching your team, your leadership team, so that they get the same level of skills that you have.
And do they commit to a term, like a 6-month program or a 12-month, or how does that work?
So for one-on-one, I have a minimum of a 6-month commitment, and there's no contract. It's just a verbal commitment. You're going to commit to the coaching process for 6 months. At least. Most stick around for significantly longer than that because they get so much value in those 6 months that they're like, yes, I want more of this. Let's take my business to even further. Let's do that.
And that's the same for the group and the one-on-one.
The group is I asked for a 12-month commitment, but it's in both cases they just pay me monthly. And I've had so many friends tell me, "Oh, you're doing it wrong. You need to get people to pay you up front." And they'll do it too. So you should do that. And I say, maybe they will, but that's not what I'm after. What I'm after is to show them that I am just as committed to the process as they are. Because if I get paid up front, and then if it doesn't work out for them, then they may be worried about getting their money back. But if they know that next month they could just stop payment to me, then I always have to give them my best if I want to continue to get paid. So I think the way I've done it, and that's just my rationale behind it, but that's how I see it, is they pay me monthly. They give me a verbal commitment that they're dedicated to the process, and I give them a verbal commitment that I'm going to do my very best to help them get the results that they're after. And so even with the group coaching, it's monthly, but I ask them for a 12-month commitment simply because in a group environment, you don't get the one-on-one dedication. And so there's some other factors that go into play for group coaching. The dynamics are significantly different.
And there's probably in a way, like an added benefit of being part of a small group, working off of each other, not just working with you.
Immensely. And at the time of this recording, in a couple of days, my group is going to be out here in Phoenix. I've rented a house in Scottsdale for all of us to stay in while they're in town, and we're going to work for a day and a half on their businesses.
Love it. And how many different groups do you work with and one-on-one clients?
So I have one group right now, and I have one-on-one clients. I max at 8. I've done more, and I don't like it. It just taxes me too much. So 8 is the maximum I'll work with one-on-one at any given time.
Well, I think we should probably wrap it up here. I think we covered a lot of ground.
Hopefully something out of that was useful to everyone listening. We were kind of all over the place.
Yeah, it's really good to hear, a lot of parts of your story that I hadn't heard before. This is really cool. So timconley.co, I believe, is your site?
Conley, Tim Conley.
Where else can folks connect with you? Is that it?
Twitter. Hop over to Twitter at Tim Conley, and that's a great place to just, a little shout out. I don't make it that easy to get a hold of me on Facebook. But if you're an entrepreneur listening and you want to connect with me, I have a group called The Forge. You can just search the groups for The Forge. And if I can see that you're an entrepreneur in your profile, a Facebook profile, I'll let you in.
Very cool. Love it. Awesome, Tim. Well, thanks for taking the time. Really helpful, really, really valuable stuff. And talk soon.
All right. Thanks a lot, Brian.
Right. Was that good? Let me know what you thought of this one. Hit reply on any of the emails that I sent you recently. You're not getting my emails? Okay, then head over to my site, castjam.com. You can join my newsletter there. You'll get my best stuff about entrepreneurship, productizing, and more. Also, a 5-star review in iTunes is always appreciated. That'll help others like us come find these episodes. All right, until next time, we get back to working on the business. Later.